Hey everybody. So how you doing, Sandra?
Fabulous. G'day.
Great. And Kriss, how you doing?
Great. How are you guys doing?
Good, very good.
Excellent.
Nice to be here.
I see
Likewise.
that Doug is already watching. Good to see you here, Douglas.
Yep.
Hey, Doug.
Welcome, Douglas.
Melbourne morning.
It's what we've got. Sydney, the centre of the universe for me. We've got Brisbane.
I'm
and
in Brisbane.
got
I'm an hour
Melbourne.
different from you. Yep.
Yeah.
So we're covering the Australian continent. I'll be curious to see how we go around the world for this. So we've got you in LA and
3 p.m. in LA.
Yep.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, we usually get some different locations, which is really good. And it's great to have people coming in from all over the world, Chris.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That sounds pretty cool.
Speaking of which, I will say welcome everybody. Where are you watching from? Let us know.
Oh,
Got
another
Trish.
Brisbane there, Chris.
Oh, excellent.
Trish from
Hi, Trish.
Brisbane.
Yep.
Don't say Brisbane. That marks you straight away as a foreigner. You got to say Brisbane.
I am a foreigner.
Well, me too, but I still say Brisbane.
Someone from Ghana. Nice.
Ghana,
Oh, wow.
welcome.
And let me just remind people who are watching on Facebook to please give StreamYard permission to show your name and profile pic. So I'll be able to credit you when you comment or ask questions. It's just that link underneath the live, StreamYard.com/Facebook. Give that a click.
Well, I like having a little bit of banter, Kris and Andrew, isn't it? It's good. We had a little bit of banter beforehand, just educating Andrew in some Australian
Lingo.
slang.
That's right.
And, we're getting there.
So I'm Canadian. I lived in the States until I was 11, and I've lived in Australia since then. So I will sometimes take the role of translator if there's Aussies and North Americans. So Sandra, when you used a phrase that I kind of went, Andrew's not going to know what that phrase means.
No, exactly. It was called, something that just comes out. We just do that. So
Yeah.
It's just natural for us. But I find that interesting because every country has different words and meanings. And I think that's the really interesting part of interacting with people from other countries and traveling, that you just take it for granted. And then you get this strange look. And then you think, oh, I need to translate this.
Yeah, it's not just the words and meanings either. It's the hand gestures. I have made the mistake of not brushing up on what hand gestures are okay or not okay. And there's a way
you might have done one that you thought was innocent and it turned out to be a swear word or something.
Something like that. So I probably have some study to do. And before next time we can travel, I'll make sure I do a bit of work on that.
Yes, it'll be nice to travel again, but it's been a long while. Oh, Douglas has done the g'day. I think that's what people think Australians say, but we do when we don't think. But I was saying in the chat, when I did the link, how fabulous it is to talk to creatives and really get an understanding of how they work and think. And Kris and Andrew, I don't know about you, but I think it's very much, we don't spend time with each other talking about how do we thought process. It can be just sometimes the doing. And so I find that quite interesting. And we'll talk about that, Kris, about, where you get your inspiration from. Andrew and I have spoken about it. And for me, mine's whimsical style. So I read a lot as a child. And so that's maybe coming through now. Oh, we've got another one in, Facebook user. Oh, that's all right. Late to the party, better late than never.
Hey, while Doug's on, I have to give him a shout out because I have a print of his on just behind me. So Thanks, Doug. It's got pride of place.
You want to point again? I'll switch you over.
I get to look at that print quite a bit. So thanks, Doug.
Nice.
Excellent work.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a nice one. I like that.
Dream Juice. Is that the name of the piece?
Is that the name of the image?
Dream Juice. Would that be the name?
I think he's saying his image is Dream Juice. Do I look at it just before I go to sleep? Is that what you're saying? I'm in the spare room.
I think that's the name of the piece, right?
Yeah. This could be interesting.
Yeah.
So Douglas, you have to let us know, what is Dream Juice? He says he's honored.
Oh, there you go.
Can we have the explanation, Doug? We can't sleep at night not knowing.
Hey, Doug had his show last week. All right. His time is done. So
That's right. That's right. It's your time now.
my time. I've name dropped him now in return. So
It says
Yeah,
Chris's
good.
inspiration is Dream Juice.
excellent. Yeah, Doug, you're behind everything that I do. It's nice
It's
to get the credit
reciprocal.
out. Yeah, that's it.
I will. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself, talk a bit about yourself, and then start showing your work? Great.
Sure. Okay. So, hi everyone. I'm Kris. I'm a commercial and fine art photographer from Brisbane in Australia. I know my accent doesn't sound like it, but yeah, I lived in Brisbane for a long time. So commercially, I do primarily performing arts photography. So I've grown up doing. I'm a musician, and I've grown up in kind of performing and in theater and stuff like that. So that was a really natural synergy for photography, getting into performing arts. So kind of on that side of things, I photograph actor headshots quite a bit. I do some theatrical branding work, so advertising for theater companies. I do dance photography, so primarily studio-based dancer work. And I'm starting to get into more, for personal work, more abstract portraiture. So kind of long exposure work, often featuring dancers, but you can't always see what the form is behind because it's abstract. And that's kind of mostly the commercial and performing arts side of things. I guess for personal projects, a lot of the work that I do, you call it composite or composite, depending on which hemisphere you're in, but a lot of Photoshop work. And I think Sandra you said before your work is often whimsical, Sandra. My work is not. Like usually my work is it's visually and thematically dark. So I'll often do kind of personal pieces about mental health or the way technology impacts our lives or our families or that sort of thing. So that's, in a nutshell, that's me.
Great. So shall I switch over to your view of your work? So you can
Yeah,
take a
sure.
Great.
So I'll give you some quick kind of examples of the stuff that I do. So here's some of the actor headshot style work that I do. They're all really clean, and the idea is really to help someone advertise themselves. So that's very particular. Some of the dance work I do, I kind of,
Beautiful.
if you've seen the New York Dance Project, that's a big inspiration for the way that I shoot. But over time, I found myself starting to get a lot more brave about using gels and kind of experimenting with lighting, and that works really well, I think. Branding for me from that theater perspective is important too. So the idea with this work is this is advertising, right? Your job is to try and stop. If someone's flipping through Facebook and they come across this, you want to stop them so they pay attention to it and hopefully help to connect someone with the theater company that's selling tickets so that they get bums and seats. So yeah, it's really fun work. It's always to a client brief, but it is something where as a photographer you can collaborate and hopefully get something that's better than you would do on your own, but then they would do on their own. This one is super fun. This is one of those shots that kind of just evolved while we were shooting. The kind of variety that you get doing theatrical branding is pretty huge. So that's a lot of fun. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So some of the kind of illustrative work that I do, this is the work that's the visually and thematically dark stuff. So this was the teaser image that was on for today's talk, and a lot of these, they're often about. Here's one that's kind of about technology and mental health, and actually a lot of them are in the space of mental health, I think, and just general mental wellness.
Kris, can I ask a question on this one? Because to me, this has got such impact. And I think the story behind your images is really sharing the thought process and what you're thinking. So particularly with women, I'd be interested in what your thought process and the story.
Sure. Okay. So a couple of years ago, back when I was shooting weddings, which I don't do anymore, but we had, shooting a wedding, you'll have that meet the clients and get to know them over a coffee kind of meeting. And we were chatting and exchanging life stories and all that. And this is one of my clients. And she was telling me the story of, before she'd met her fiance, kind of a stage she went through in life that wasn't so great, where I'll just go full screen. She was in kind of a stage of life where she had a lot of stuff going wrong in her life, whether it was health or other issues, and she wasn't necessarily getting a lot of support from other people, but she often found herself in the role of giving support to other people. So the way she explained it was, she was there for others, but others weren't necessarily there for her. Now that all changed. You know, she met her fiance and got married and all that. So things definitely improved. But it was such a strong story in the way that she told it, and that's often how I'll get inspiration from this stuff. Is if someone, whether it's family or friends or whoever, if they're telling a story and it's kind of like, wow, that's emotionally, that's rich, and I can feel what you're explaining to me, then for me the challenge is to put that into an image and try and drag that narrative out, so that as a viewer you go through a similar journey to the person feeling that thing. So
can I tease a little bit more out, because I sort of, I know that Kris's work, and I think it's really good for creatives to hear other sides. For this, was this a planned shoot where you set up your models? You know, where did you get your backgrounds? All of those things to put all these elements together.
Yeah, no, definitely a planned shoot, and this is one where I've locked the camera down on a tripod to do the composite style work. I tend to, for stuff like this, I'll try and kind of visualize the environment it's going to be in, and then I'll go through my mental list of people's homes that I know or whatever to, you know, think, hey, is there a house that has a foreground area with like a kitchen and an eating area and then a hallway extending into the distance that has a room in the back? Sometimes I'll do a little bit of remodeling in Photoshop. It's probably easier to not. So for this one, I happen to know someone that had a house that kind of fit the bill. And yeah, a little bit of Photoshop remodeling, but not too much. But yeah, the planning this out for the shoot was really pretty particular. Like you can see that the subject is the lady with blonde hair, and she's in there 3 times wearing 3 different dresses, and that's important because you need to be able to see that it's the same person on different times. Specifically chose other subjects who don't have blonde hair, so there was less of a chance of kind of visually confusing the different parts. And then obviously in the back you can see her sitting by herself, and those dresses are all up there, but she's wearing gray. And if you look in the foreground, the colors that all the other women in the foreground are wearing, they're all pretty muted as well. So you know, hopefully there's a message coming through where in the foreground the blonde lady is projecting energy and color, and the others are low, when in truth she's pretty low too. So yeah, this was there's a lot about this that's very planned. Sometimes stuff will evolve when you're shooting this stuff, but for this one the recipe was pretty set.
Thanks for sharing, Kris. That's really interesting.
Nice.
So yeah, like as I said, a lot of this stuff is kind of based on mental health. A little bit of it's based on technology. So, you know, here's an example of one, and Sandra, I think you've seen this one before.
Yeah. Yep.
It's one day I kind of realized that I'd been sitting on the couch watching a video of some person shooing a bear off of their lawn for 30 minutes. And I went, wow, I just got nothing out of that. Like, I'm not a better person for it. That was empty content. It was like empty calories. Ooh, that's a bit like junk food. So, you know, that a lot of these stories come from me or how I feel as a parent or as a family member. Actually, I'll show this one, and this one's definitely, this is not made for a wide monitor. Similar to the other one, I realized one day that I'd come home from work and I'd sat on the couch on my phone and just sat there scrolling through probably the news or whatever for hours. And you know what it's like sometimes when you've had a long day and you're really tired, you just kind of want to switch off. But meanwhile, the kids are there and they're only young for a little while, and they're hanging around and they want to play. And I was probably, for this one, in the space my brain was in, I was not the supportive great dad. I was the dad on the phone. And eventually, if you do that, you're going to lose something. So that's where the story comes from. And it's really about me talking about my truth, I guess, or something about I don't know, you have to be a bit vulnerable if you make a story like this, because you're opening up a part of you that isn't always positive.
It's
But
it's powerful in various
Mm.
ways, and one thing it also reminds me of is the fact that it's the kind of detachment is. There was this one photo I saw that was like very etched in my brain. It was so kind of frustrating about the whole reality of how everyone's always on the smartphone. It was a photo of, I think, the Reich Museum, I think it's called, in Amsterdam. And there's all these amazing like Rembrandt paintings around, and all the kids sitting around are on their phones.
mhm,
So like no one's looking at the amazing artwork that Rembrandt did or some of these other masters had on the walls. They're all looking at their phones. And that was like very powerful to me, just showing how we've gotten into this weird obsession, I guess you could say, with
Mm.
mobile photography, mobile phones. Yeah.
so I know that photo, and I think if we're thinking about the same one, that it's not quite what you think, because they were kids on a school excursion, and they were using their phones to look up details of the artwork that they had been looking at. So
Could be, but the point is that it made a good statement, though,
made a good statement,
Mm.
yeah.
that
And like,
people are missing life itself by being kind of obsessive with the whole mobile technology.
Yeah.
yeah, look, and I don't want to say I'm an anti-technology person, because I'm super nerd person, and I've got screens just surrounding me and stuff. So like, I find something like Facebook, it is really good for connecting with family, and I have a lot of family overseas, and you can, or friends or whatever, and you're catching up with
Sure.
news, and so I'm not going to say this is all bad, but there are things about technology that kind of that sneak in. Let me give you another example, actually. So this is a piece. It's called Relentless, and it that's my daughter in the middle. So I lean on family sometimes for personal projects, but it kind of occurred to us one day while we were chatting that, like, when I was a kid, if there was someone bullying at school or whatever, you left them behind. Like, you went home and you're in your house and it's safe, and you can go to your room, and like your room is your safe place, right?
Mm.
And it's different now. It's because technology can allow things to sneak in past the watchful eye of parents and all that. You have kids that are exposed to this stuff, and they don't have that kind of protective bubble around them in the same way. They've got quite a different bubble around them sometimes, and it's not a positive one. And that's, like, as a parent, that's a bit of a fear, right? Is we taught our kids to be digitally literate and hopefully make good choices when they're online. But there's an amount of not being in control as a parent and not being able to protect your kids. So this was really about the kind of knots you could get yourself into as a kid if you fell into that pattern of maybe being bullied or just being in an unhealthy online situation, even though in this picture the parents are probably just outside. You can see there's like an outline of a door on the top sort of left. Maybe they're out in the next room just watching TV, and they're right there and they could help, but she's still all alone somehow. So yeah, that's another one of these where it's an intersection of mental health and technology, I think.
Kris and Andrew, and I find this fascinating, as we spoke about before. What we create with is very much what's in us, in our soul, and what resonates with us. And so the process of, like, Kris, I look at those, that some of those are social issues, and things to be aware of. For me, when I do my whimsical work, it's whimsical, but there's a story behind it, and it's not so evident. And Andrew's work is the same, and I find that fascinating, that we all have this thought process and project our soul out on, if you want, a piece of paper or canvas or digitally. And I find that really fascinating, that where this comes from and how we then share it. So I don't know, Kris and Andrew, what's your thoughts on that as well?
Well, Kriss?
Well, I'd say for me, it kind of depends on the purpose. Like something like these ones I've been walking through, I've got a goal, and that's to communicate something, right? I want to have this message that lands with the viewer, and I want to try and take them out of their own head and put them in someone else's. Or also, and this is kind of weird, but it's interesting. There's sometimes I'll show these to people, and they will see themselves in it, and they'll connect with it, and it's kind of comforting in some ways, because if you feel a certain way and then you see some art or you see something and you go, oh, that person feels the same way that I do, they understand, and I'm not alone in feeling this way. It's kind of nice to make that work, to connect. But that's these pieces. There are other, like some of the abstract portraiture that I do. It's not that at all, right? It's not trying to pass a narrative along. And if you can see a narrative in it, great. And I think people will interpret things a certain way and sometimes see the story they need to see. But
Beautiful
these are
word.
done. This is the purpose for this is different. It's really to hopefully be a visually engaging art piece. And then if you see more in it, then that's great.
I see some kind of similarities. Like for me, I might have a very distinct theme or idea that I need to compose, and I'll pull it together. And then other times, similar to this, I go into more of an abstract zone where I'm kind of playing with texture and color. And it's more like I'm trying to emanate almost like the feeling I got from a song that I love or something. So it's more like I might do a series that is supposed to be like a meditative state or a wonderful emotion I got from abstract or ambient music or something. So, yeah. Now,
so do you feel, are you able to do something where you feel satisfied at the end and you go, yeah, this does capture how I felt? Like, how often do you hit that target?
Yeah. So for me, doing my work, and let me jump back to this view. So for me, doing my work, I, it's interesting. Like you put your work up on the social arena, social networks, and you get feedback from people. And some people like really love something, or sometimes you post it and people don't really react. And I find that very interesting and kind of strange, because what happens is sometimes I post something that I really love and people don't react well. And I'm like, that's weird, because I like really love this piece of mine. So, in the end, I always think that if you're going to be a good artist, you create for yourself, and you create for yourself, but you share it. And if other people connect, great. But if they hate it, you have to be strong enough to just keep on being you. So, but I've never had problems like with, people ask like, when do you know when your work is done? I don't have problems with that. I know pretty much when it's gotten too far or it's gotten to a point. And then, how do you know if you like your work or don't like your work? It's sort of like a lot of times I don't like my work when I look in the past, but in the moment, kind of a lot of the work I'm doing, I'm enjoying, and I feel like it represents me well. But I think we keep getting better, that, the work I do now, maybe in 4 years might be like certain pieces might be embarrassing to me.
But that's good. Like in a way, that's great. People like, it's easy for artists to compare themselves to other artists, especially ones that they respect, right? Because we've all cultivated networks of stuff that we like to look at. And then if you go, well, oh my gosh, that work is so good, I wish I could be that good, or I'm not as good as that. And to me, that's always a bit of a trap. Like there's one person you should be comparing yourself to. And there's two. There's the one of you a year or two ago, and there's the one of you a year or two from now. And that's it. So, whether it's competing for likes or entering stuff in awards or whatever, like that's nice. And that's a way of keeping score, but it's probably not the thing that should motivate you. So when you look back on your older work and you go, I'm a bit embarrassed by that, great, because you've learned stuff and you're better than you were.
But I would say that I am, still, I don't know if insecure is the word, but I'm still affected by the fact that if I look at my work on Instagram and I think that was a good piece, and then I get like 30 likes or something, and then I look at someone else that I follow and I see something that I didn't think was even that good, and they've got like 500 likes. I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah, the things that push your buttons and the things that push the Instagram audience's buttons are different, right? I mean,
very much so.
There are landscape photographers that do intricate. I can't even speak this morning.
Intricate,
beautiful work that may not get that, but there's a lot of stuff on Instagram that's like super saturated, and it kind of rewards you for scrolling. And I like that. So the criteria for getting over the line, having someone push like, is not the same criteria as what you like artistically, and that's okay. It's not wrong. It just means
Right. So I would go as far as to say that here's kind of a an abstract concept to a degree, but I would go as far as to say that the whole social network experiment that we're in is not for you to get affected and become more insecure and more concerned about likes and follows and all that, but for you to become stronger, to not really care about it, even though you're also engaged with it. So it's kind of like a weird dance where you do it, you show your work, you get the feedback, but in some ways you don't really care. You just keep moving forward, forward.
Yep.
So
I've kind of found the same thing with submitting work for competitions as well. Like, and you know, Sandra's been in probably the same boat. I'm sure you submit work that you love and it doesn't do what you thought it would, or you submit work that maybe you didn't love as much and it does great. But if you tie your worth, you can't tie your worth to the scores that you get in competition judging. And you can't even tie the score to the quality of the image, right? Because they're human beings judging things, and it's subjective, and that's good. It should be subjective. But I think that's one thing that kind of competition entry has been really good for me is knocking me down a few pegs and also giving me a little more of a thicker skin so I can separate myself from the work and try and evaluate work objectively, if that makes any sense.
And I think, like Kris, you know, for me, it's the same deal. I've put into one comp, got a gold, put into another comp, get nothing. But I'm going to add something else into the mix, and it's just some, you know, what Kris and Andrew, what you were talking about. Sometimes for me, and I don't know if others feel this, but I have a sense of a feeling I want to create something. And it could be something I've seen, something I'm feeling, something I'm read, and I've got to create. And so that's a feeling that's coming out and being expressed in my style. But with someone else who looks at it, the viewer, Andrew, what you were talking about, is that viewer may not get that feeling because they may not have experienced it or have experienced it and move on. And so I think sometimes that viewer doesn't get that sense of what particularly for me, what I'm feeling, and I've got to get it out. And once I get it out, it's like I'm done. I've got that feeling out. I've put something together. And I think that's listening to you, Kris and Andrew, is what made me just realise that, you know, it's like an urge. I want to eat. Okay, well, what am I going to eat? And so I'm going to create. Oh, I'll get this picture. But I think that's just what I've realised by listening to you two, analysing myself as well.
And I was going to say it's really nice to hear that, because I wasn't sure other people felt that way, who are creative. So like, yeah. So my thing is like, it's like my soul nags me, you have to create. And so if I don't create for a certain amount of time, it's like my soul is like saying, you're not feeding me, you're not nurturing me. And then, so it's kind of like a mixture of, therapy, like you're not going to your visual therapy. And it's also, an adventure. So it's like saying your soul's like saying you're not going on this adventure you're supposed to go on. And so I feel like my soul itself is nagging me to create a lot of times. So it's good to hear you say that as well.
Yeah. Kris, do you feel like that at all?
Yeah, I do. So sometimes, and I've just popped a piece up now if you want to have a look, Andrew.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
There's this is a pretty new piece, and you know, apologies, competition judges, you might see this come across your screen at some stage. A couple of years ago, I got to listen to someone from Beyond Blue, which is a mental health organization here in Australia, come and speak, and they talked about they went through a phase of being really depressed, and you know, they got through it, was great, but there was a period where it was just hard to get out of bed and it was hard to go to work. And the way the lady was talking about it, there's like this fog that would pull her back to bed. And it didn't make total sense at the time, but it was still to me, but like I couldn't identify with it, but I understood what the message she was saying. And then I went through a period where that did make a lot of sense. So when we've had in my family, some people pass away. My parents have both passed away in the last sort of 4 years. And that's a big change, right? So there have been days where I felt that way too. And then I felt really compelled to make this image, which is hopefully attempting to tell that story of someone they're trying really hard to leave the house. And it's been a couple of days. And it's not easy, and it would be just so much easier to go back to bed and go back to sleep and shut out the world and not have to deal with that. And, you know, that's a trap too, because that means this person is pushing that to the next day and the next day, and you know, you have to pay your dues eventually. But there's this the narrative that I'm trying to express in here is the push and pull between wanting to get out and kind of recover your life again versus telling yourself, no, you should go back to sleep. Now, the thing that was really interesting with this is I showed this to a friend. If I'm doing stuff for competition, which this was a piece that's doing the rounds at the moment, I will show it to other photographer friends and other just people to read it and tell me what story they see, so that I know if I'm the clues that I'm putting and if they're being read properly. And I showed this to a friend, and she got upset, and not in a angry way, but it recalled some feelings that she'd had. She'd been in a domestic violence situation in her life, and there was a period where she had to tell herself to leave the house and get out. So even though that's not at all the message that I intended to give, but there were enough clues in here that that's what it unlocked. And it didn't make, like, she wasn't angry about the fact that it dredged that up. I think she, in some ways, some time had passed and she put that behind her, so she felt okay to revisit that. But like what you were saying about different people responding to different art, it's not all that they don't respond. Sometimes they just respond in a way that you weren't expecting, but that's the story that they needed to see and they needed to connect with.
Right. And Douglas has a question about this piece. Are the two curtain colors relevant as well? I see that one's yellow and one is kind of a blue or cooler color.
Yeah, a little bit, although I'll probably say by luck more than anything. I mean, that back room is cool and calm, and it's a place of, I don't know, it's very quiet. So blue's kind of a more calming color. Yellow's reflecting the light coming, not reflecting, that's a visual term, represents the light coming in from outside. So there probably is a little bit of meaning coming in. I think for this, I really wanted to lean into the blue-yellow palette.
Sure.
So those are just natural colors to choose.
Great.
Kriss, I love the detail of the fog or the shadow with the hands on the arm to give that pull, you know, and that's when you really look in this image, there's so many stories within that. And then that's hands just grasping and the internal struggle. And I think that's what's beautiful about a narrative like this, is that there's so many stories. And we either resonate with it for things we've experienced or it makes you think.
Right. And I was going to say that the kind of ghost-like figure is a good depiction or metaphor for those kind of emotional states. So when you feel like you're trapped, you do feel like there is a ghost that's literally holding you back. So it's a good metaphor for that. Yeah.
But let's, if anyone's got some thoughts or questions, you know, please put them in the chat. You know, it'd be really interesting.
And Doug did have a question, or Douglas had a question about the previous image with your daughter with the laptop. So we could go back to that image. He was asking, is the dome shape to represent the brain?
It does look like that. And it may feel like it represents the brain, but it's probably more, the dome shape has to be that way for this composition to work. Right. I've got some kind of work in progress stuff for this that might illustrate what I'm talking about. So like for this stuff, I go through a process of sketching and, you know, trying to work out how I'm going to lay something out. I'll often do kind of a photo, like a test run of a photo. And this is the kind of composition that I thought I was going to lean on originally. So it's still, you know, similar elements where the young person's in bed and there's a laptop there and these images are kind of being projected around. But I kind of realized that if I did that, half of those images would be flat onto the user and you wouldn't see, or to the viewer, you wouldn't see them. And then they would like cover each other if they were trying to surround her. So visually it wouldn't work. So kind of threw that away and prototyped it to try this. This is another test shot. And now it's like, okay, cool. These things aren't going to collaborate one another. Visually, it makes sense to the viewer, and I can leave a little gap so you can see through to the person. And that kind of just evolved into that particular shape. So
Nice.
in fact, this is kind of goofy. The way I got it was, there's an old, when you mat something and you do a terrible job and you cut it out the wrong way. Well, this is an old one of those prints. I got my daughter to hide on a pole, and I had her kind of move it around and took a whole bunch of photos, and then grabbed the planes that those were in and used those as kind of the locations for all of these. So yeah, I guess, Doug, it isn't intended to be the brain. It's probably more intended to be a cage. But yeah, it's pretty cool that it does look like the brain as well.
And that's, again, I find that interesting how we all visually see something different. I would have never have thought of a brain. So I find that fascinating, just where our thoughts go with images.
And sounds like she's referring to all of us, but maybe a direct compliment to you, Kris, is I think Sayaban, is maybe how you say it. Is she saying you're also talented?
Siobhan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks,
You're also
Siobhan.
talented, such inspiration.
Thanks, Siobhan.
And I
That's
think
really
we're all talented in different ways, but Kris, your work is very deep, Kris, and I find that very interesting, and just how you express it. And we all do it differently.
And you need to post.
Yes.
You need to post more in my digital art group.
Okay, deal. You can be my conscience and make sure that I do that. So.
Andrea says, "Loving your thought process, Kris."
Oh, thanks, Andrea. Andrea is a friend, so we
Siobhan's
do together, and she's several of these images. She's been here while pieces were made. So yeah.
And Doug says, "Love this."
Oh, this is a classic. This one, Kris.
The Viking Ship. Yeah, this is a full-on one. So this isn't particularly about mental health.
No. Oh, it could be. It could be.
It could be. Well, it sort of is. I mean, there is a story in the middle of it it's harder to read, and it's obscured for sure.
Centered in the midst of turmoil or something.
Something like that. Yeah. So I mean, I think where this evolved to is it's a story about. So in my head, they're on this journey to lay someone to rest, and there's a storm happening, and the whole crew is freaking out because they're probably going to lose their life, and they're all quite worried. But the family in the middle, they've lost someone important to them, and kind of doesn't matter anymore. They're together, and that's what's important. That's kind of a short way of telling the story.
No, that's probably a personal one there, Kris. But can I ask you the what's the word I'm looking for? How drilled down do you go to capture your elements? Because I know I saw this piece in another class, your rope, all of those things. Like, how wacky are you when you're trying to get all these elements? Like, come on, unreveal all these secrets.
Yeah, okay. So there are some things in here that are not what they look like. Like there's those bundles of cargo behind them. That's just a kid's toy box with a blanket. And I think I used curling ribbon around them and then replace that with rope later. So there's some really cheap props in here. Probably importantly, there's a couple of props that have meaning to me. Like there's a little red bowl that's in the water down there, and it's something that my mother made in a pottery class when she was pregnant with me. And then she left it there to be, in the kiln and fired and all that stuff. And she came back to pick it up with me as a baby. So like that's to me, that's like it's not the best looking piece of pottery in the world, but it's pretty important. And then the box that daughter is the box the daughter's holding is it's a box my dad made for me. So being the super nerdy person that I am, I'd play collectible card games like Magic the Gathering, and he made me a box so I could have decks of cards, and it looked nice and has dividers and all that. But so there's things in here that are they're unimportant to the story, but they're important to me just to embed little bits of family in here. And then other things like the barrels, they're from the courtyard at a theater that I shoot at quite often. The other people that are in this, the two adults are actors, and the two kids are, the two adults in the crew are actors. The two kids are friends. The family in the middle is a friend of mine who's a historical reenactment person. So like all of the clothes that he and his daughter are wearing are made of the right fibers, and they're people take a lot of care to make sure the stuff is right. And the ship itself is from, we were in Denmark, and there was a Viking museum. So there was a reconstruction of an old ocean-going ship. Do I have it here? I think I do. Yeah, so that's the original
I
shot.
was going to say, have you got those? Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I kind of go through and there's bad sketching. I'm such a bad sketch artist, but you know,
it's all been revealed now, Kriss.
yeah. And not only that, I'm just bad Photoshop. Look at that. How epic is that? That just looks perfect.
Real. That looks
photoshopping real. Water is really hard. So this was a good journey of discovery and learning to kind of iterate through
lots of layers, I would imagine.
Lots of layers and lots of trials and a little bit of experimentation and you know, kind of lots of finessing. And one of the some of the behind the scenes. So anyone who thinks you need a studio to shoot this stuff, you're very wrong. I have a super low budget studio. So how's this? I needed to drench this guy. There's this dad who's about to pour a bucket of freezing cold water on him to get that expression right. So, you know, that's cruel but excellent. So yeah, that's here you go. This is how you turn a toy box into a piece of cargo.
Oh, that's detailed, Kriss. That's detailed.
Great to see.
So, yeah.
Great to see.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to say, when it comes to the sketch that you showed, you could probably put it on an NFT gallery and sell it for $1 million.
Oh, you think so? You think that's going to get $1 million? Excellent. Okay. Look, as long as it gets,
I was going to vote $5 billion.
Compete with Beeple or whatever his name is. Yeah.
As long as it gets $1 million over and over again, so I get my cut repeatedly. That's right. That's the important thing. So yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
But it's interesting to see how you put it together, right? Really planning, Kriss.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of these illustrative ones, I'm an engineer. There is an amount of planning that goes into it. Not all images need to be that way, of course, right? But if like a lot of this is about controlling the story and making sure only the elements that you need are in it, and nothing else that doesn't belong. Like I'm not sure this was super disciplined of me. This is pretty old now, but there are other ones like the one we talked about before. Worked pretty hard to make sure if there's an element in this, it belongs here and it's here for a reason, and there's nothing here that doesn't belong. So yeah, a lot of these things I'll show you this one actually. I kind of sketched out what I wanted it to look like before I found the location, and then just happened to find a house that had a room that was pretty good.
Cool.
So then on top of that, kind of sketched out how I wanted it to look, and you know, maybe what the final composition would be like, and obviously it evolved a little bit after that, but requiring a little bit of digital remodeling to get the house to look the way that I wanted. I'm way better at digital remodeling than I am at actual remodeling, so Photoshop's the way to go. But you're right, it is planned out, right? I mean, this isn't something where it evolves as you go. If you kind of look at this and you compare it to the final image, they're pretty close. So yeah, they're planned for sure.
Now it's interesting to see that process of the planning, just how you do it, Kriss. Because we've had a few on, and some will plan, some will be organic, and again, I find that fascinating. Any questions? Our audience has been a bit quiet there, Andrew.
Yeah, I never understand that about creatives. Is they always act so shy with the questions, you know?
Yeah. Put in a comment. We'd love to know whether you're still out there and in doing that. But Kriss, thanks very much.
Yeah, it's great to see, you know, like how you compose the elements together to make something that really comes together nicely. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. I'm really happy to share.
And there's, I just love the depth of the stories that are in there, Kriss. And I also think sharing a little bit of yourself, because I think that's what creatives do, but we don't share it openly. Oh, yes, I remember this one.
Yeah, when you said sharing yourself.
Good question.
Oh, excellent. I love a good question.
Yeah. It's come from Siobhan.
So where do you usually get stuck?
That's an excellent question. And, hopefully, that little curve, the graph of I've got this. I am great. This is great. This is terrible. I am terrible. So when do you get down there? I will get stuck sometimes on a technical aspect. So if there's something that I'm trying to do visually and I can't quite make it work, then I'll put the project away for a little while, and sometimes I'll come back to it and sometimes not. I think often I grew up doing software development, and a lot of times when you do software development, if there's something that's hard, you do a test run of it first. So you've kind of figure out the hard stuff, and then when you do the real version, like you throw that away and you do the real version, so that you have fewer problems when that happens. And I apply that to this work too. So sometimes I'll get stuck on something really technically difficult. I think where I'm more likely to get stuck, and I don't know if it's a really good question. If there's an idea that I want to get out there, but I'm not sure how to visually represent it, then I'll have notes and I'll sketch and I'll kind of put it away and come back and try again until I've happened upon the combination of things that maybe tells the story the way that I want. So I'd say if I get stuck anywhere, it's probably that. It's putting the bones of something together and going, this is not quite telling the story that I want yet, and then coming back.
And I was going to say, I was going to say I think it's fine to sometimes fail. Like you have a grand vision and you want to really bring out the emotion of it, and you keep adding elements and it just doesn't work. And hopefully you can detour and go into a new direction and create something different, and that's fine. But sometimes you just have to kind of like let it go if it doesn't work, So
can I give you a failure example? Because I've got a really good one. One that
please.
Another NFT here.
Another NFT with bad sketching. So like the image that was the kind of the hero image for this talk today, I ended up doing it twice. So I started off with the same process as usual in sketching and oh no, all my stuff's out in the wrong order. That's no good. I built it not with a single point perspective. I built it with a different kind of view, which is a bit of a personal challenge. How terrible is that? So okay, you prototype something, doesn't quite work, you move on. But I built this originally, and I got to this stage with this image, and it kind of tells the story that I want, but it's not really. It's not super effective, and it got out into the world a little bit, but actually Sean, who's in this, Sean said, Kris, you can do way better than this. So I stopped and took it apart and started from scratch and kind of built a single point perspective version, and realized that those two windows, like in this one, I had these windows at the back of the room and they look a little bit like eyes. So I wonder if we can use that to create the presence at the back of the room that is looking at this artist. Yes, I can. So you can see I've kind of rescued some of the assets from the original Go and then changed it. So it's almost a lot of similar elements, but I started again from scratch. So failure was okay, right? Like making this, you got to a certain point, learned a bunch of stuff doing it, learned some Photoshop stuff, learned about what's effective or what's not effective, and then threw it away and started again.
Nice.
And that's interesting. You did the perspective lines, Kris.
You
use those as your guides.
Yeah, I'll do that quite a bit, like just because if I've got like a vanishing point in the center, like for this one, I needed to construct a room, and in the end, I blew those side walls away, so it didn't matter so much. But your eye will point out problems if you don't do this right, if you're doing composite work. So I find it's really useful for me to put these guidelines in if I'm creating an environment, just so. And again, a lot of the stuff that I do ends up being single point perspective. So it's pretty easy to put these kinds of guidelines in, but that stops you from making mistakes that mean the final product isn't convincing, because it doesn't take much if you're doing a composite piece like this for a viewer to get that it's a fake. Like you need to hypnotize them and make sure that it's visually consistent. If you have things that don't fit, then it'll break the spell pretty easily.
So Kris, you look for that photorealism, that realism that would be there in real life.
Yeah, maybe with respect to geometry and perspective, yes. Maybe not with I don't know if this is photorealistic. I don't know how many people have floating screens in their house.
No,
but
no.
I mean, we'll go back to this one again. There's a version where there are guidelines to make sure that I understand where the floor is sitting, and that the line that starts along the bottom here keeps going and is unbroken, so that all the walls and bits line up. Yeah, like for me, that's pretty important to make sure that's consistent.
No, thank you.
Nice.
Oh, it's been a really interesting chat, Kris. Andrew, don't you think?
Yeah,
It's
excellent.
really-
Great to see your process and your work, and looks like a lot of work there. So a lot of work to create one image, you know.
There is a bit of work, but hopefully it's worth it at the end of the day.
Oh, I think it is. Yep.
Yeah, excellent work though. So to find Kris online, you can find him at imagesbyanderson.com, and on Instagram, Images by Anderson as well. So instagram.com/imagesbyanderson. And give a little shout out to, where's Sandra? So yeah, you can find Sandra at sandradimagery.com, and on Instagram at sandradimagery. And then for those who are already watching on YouTube, thank you. And for those who haven't, please subscribe for my digital art, Photoshop, and photography focused live streams and digital art talks like this at YouTube, Digital Art Drew. So look for Digital Art Drew, and please subscribe and click that notification button so you get notified of the live events. And one last thing is, if you are on Facebook, please come and join my digital art group. So the digital art group, facebook.com/groups, the digital art group. Or I think if you just look for digital art group, it'll come up in the search. But yeah. So yeah, thank you so much, Kris. It was quite wonderful.
Really fascinating. Is there any questions before we head off into the sunset or anything? Now's the time that you can be a keyboard warrior and put something there. But thanks, Kris. It's been a real pleasure. I love these chats because it's really great.
Douglas says, thanks, Kris. Always inspiring.
Thanks, buddy.
Shaban, thank
Shaban,
you.
Yep.
So yeah,
it's been lots of fun. It's really nice to talk to people and have kind of bounce back and
share your process a bit. So yeah, thanks everyone for being here, and thank you so much, Kris and Sandra. And look for us next Wednesday at the same time, 3 p.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Australian time.
Yep.
And Andrea says thanks to Kris as well. So yeah, thanks everyone for being here. Have a good one.